Texas is implementing the most aggressive property tax reforms in state history, committing $51 billion over 2 years to tax relief programs, while neighboring states pursue their own dramatic overhauls. The centerpiece, Texas Proposition 13, scheduled for the November 2025 ballot, would increase homestead exemptions to $140,000 and provide seniors up to $200,000 in total exemptions, potentially eliminating school property taxes entirely for many elderly homeowners. These reforms come as Texas property owners face the sixth highest effective tax rates nationally, at 1.47 to 1.66%, significantly exceeding all neighboring states despite Texas having no state income tax. The reforms represent both unprecedented relief for homeowners and serious fiscal risks that economists warn could destabilize state finances as surplus funds diminish from their peak of $32.7 billion to the current $23.8 billion. Senate Bill 9, which passed the Texas Senate 18-3 in August 2025, would reduce the voter approval tax rate from 3.5% to 2.5% for cities and counties with populations exceeding 75,000, though its final House passage and gubernatorial signature remain unconfirmed. This legislation builds upon the sweeping reforms already enacted, including the June 2025 passage of SB 4 and SB 23. Which increased school district homestead exemptions from $100,000 to $140,000 and boosted senior and disabled exemptions from $10,000 to $60,000. The combined package requires voter approval on November 4, 2025, alongside 16 other constitutional amendments. The financial impact varies dramatically by property value and location. For the average Texas home valued at $302,000, the reforms deliver approximately $490 in annual savings, while seniors with the full $200,000 exemption could see their school property taxes eliminated entirely. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick champions these measures, stating that 492 school districts, nearly half of all Texas districts, have average home values below $140,000, meaning homeowners in those areas could pay zero school maintenance and operations taxes. The state has allocated $3 billion specifically for school district compression to replace lost local revenue, maintaining educational funding while reducing taxpayer burden. Business owners benefit through HB 9's increase in personal property exemptions from $2,500 to $125,000, a 50-fold increase that eliminates property taxes for many small businesses. These reforms passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, including unanimous Senate approval for the homestead exemption increase and a 143-0 House vote, reflecting broad political consensus despite underlying fiscal concerns about long-term sustainability. Texas homeowners currently pay an average of $3,872 to $5,466 annually in property taxes, with effective rates ranging from 1.47 to 1.66% depending on location and methodology. These rates place Texas 6th or 7th nationally for property tax burden, well above the national average of 0.90% and significantly higher than all neighboring states. Louisiana at 0.62%, Arkansas at 0.66%, New Mexico at 0.84%, and Oklahoma at 0.99%. The disparity becomes even more striking considering Texas has no state income tax, theoretically offsetting the higher property tax burden. Geographic variations within Texas create dramatic differences in tax burden. Fort Bend County residents face a 2.06% effective rate, averaging $6,787 annually, while Terrell County maintains just 0.67%, with average bills of $285. Major metropolitan areas bear the heaviest burden. Travis County, Austin residents pay an average of $7,487. Collin County homeowners face $7,202 bills, and Dallas County averages $4,360. Urban counties generate the bulk of property tax revenue, with Harris County alone approving a $2.67 billion budget in 2024 using the controversial disaster loophole provision. The 5-year trend reveals property taxes rising 26% from 2019 to 2023, outpacing the national increase of 21% despite multiple rounds of legislative relief. Some Austin area properties saw values surge 53% in a single year. from $428,000 to $656,000, demonstrating how rapidly appreciating property values can overwhelm rate compression efforts. School districts collect 55% of all property taxes, with approximately 4,000 local entities possessing taxation authority, creating a complex web of overlapping jurisdictions that complicates reform efforts. Florida's House Select Committee on Property Taxes, formed in April 2025 and co-chaired by Representatives Toby Overdorf and Vicky Lopez, is studying the feasibility of completely eliminating property taxes through a constitutional amendment potentially appearing on the 2026 ballot. Governor Ron DeSantis strongly supports elimination, calling property taxes rent to the government, and proposing immediate relief through $1,000 rebates for each of Florida's 5.1 million homesteaded properties, totaling approximately $5.1 billion in December 2025 distributions. The most controversial proposal involves replacing property tax revenue with a 12% state sales tax, doubling Florida's current 6% rate to generate the necessary $43 to $55 billion annually. This approach faces overwhelming opposition, with 71% of Florida voters rejecting the concept, according to March 2025 polling. The Florida Policy Institute warns such a shift would make Florida's sales tax the highest nationally, while disproportionately burdening low to moderate income families and creating dangerous revenue volatility during economic downturns. Current legislative proposals include HB 359, creating a $100,000 property tax exemption for all real property, with companion constitutional amendment HB 357 and HB 787, capping year-over-year property tax revenue growth at 2%. The legislature allocated $1 million for a comprehensive study due November 1, 2025, examining alternatives to the current system. DeSantis has suggested innovative revenue sources, including entry taxes for new residents and increased tourism-related fees, rather than broad sales tax increases. Florida's existing Save Our Homes cap limits assessment increases to 3% annually, or the Consumer Price Index, whichever is less, providing some protection for homesteaded properties. Amendment 5, approved in 2024, added automatic inflation adjustments to homestead exemptions starting in 2025. Local governments strongly oppose elimination efforts, as property taxes represent 72.6% of county revenue and 67.4% of municipal revenue, with school districts depending on property taxes for 50 to 60% of their funding. Please take 2 seconds to help me out and hit the like and subscribe if you find this video interesting so far. Each like, subscribe, and share helps support this channel and keeps us motivated to keep making you great content. Thank you. Now, let's continue. Nebraska achieved substantial property tax reform through LB 34, passed during a 2024 special session and operative August 20th, 2024, implementing hard caps on property tax collection growth and creating a school district property tax relief credit fund, with escalating relief amounts $750 million in 2024 and 25, rising to $838 million by 2027-28, with 3% annual increases thereafter. Governor Jim Pillen's comprehensive Nebraska plan to cut property taxes targets a 40% reduction from $5.3 billion to about $3 billion annually through state assumption of $2.6 billion in K-12 operational costs, elimination of 114 sales tax exemptions generating $950 million, and increased sin taxes on cigarettes, vaping, alcohol, and gambling producing over $200 million. The EPIC Option Consumption Tax Initiative, which would eliminate property, income, and inheritance taxes after January 1, 2028, failed to collect the required 123,190 signatures in 2024, but has relaunched as EPIC Option 2.0 for the 2026 ballot. Nebraska simultaneously reduced income tax rates from 5.2% to 4.55% in January 2025, heading toward 3.99% by 2027, while moving Social Security benefits to 100% exemption and shifting community college funding from property taxes to state funding, providing $282.5 million in relief. Michigan's reform efforts have stalled significantly, with the Axe-MI tax ballot initiative failing to collect the required 446,198 signatures by July 2024, despite proposing complete property tax elimination, saving property owners an estimated $14 billion annually. Governor Gretchen Whitmer opposes major property tax reform, stating in January 2024, "I don't think you're going to see any proposals on that front," instead prioritizing income tax relief and working families' tax credit expansion. Michigan's Proposal A from 1994 continues limiting assessment increases to 5% annually, hitting the maximum cap for the first time statewide in 2024, while Detroit considers a land value tax proposal requiring state legislative approval before appearing on the ballot. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision in Tyler v. Hennepin County, May 25, 2023, fundamentally altered property tax foreclosure practices across 12 states and the District of Columbia. The case involved 94-year-old Geraldine Tyler, whose Minneapolis condominium was sold for $40,000 to satisfy a $15,000 tax debt, with Hennepin County retaining the $25,000 surplus. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that this violated the Fifth Amendment's takings clause, establishing that governments cannot keep more than what is owed, a principle dating back to the Magna Carta. The decision prompted immediate legislative responses. New York amended Article 11 retroactively, requiring 45-day determinations of surplus amounts and establishing clear claims procedures. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey signed comprehensive surplus funds legislation mandating returns to former homeowners while reducing interest rates and offering flexible repayment plans. Nebraska's Supreme Court imposed liability on tax deed holders for just compensation. Justice Gorsuch's concurrence emphasized that economic penalties serving deterrence purposes constitute fines subject to Eighth Amendment limits, potentially opening additional constitutional challenges. Meanwhile, Texas Tax Code Sections 26.042D and 26.042E create the controversial disaster loophole, allowing 8% property tax increases without voter approval following gubernatorial disaster declarations, compared to the normal 3.5% cap. Harris County utilized this provision in 2024 following May's derecho storm and Hurricane Beryl, approving a 10.06% total increase, adding $160 annually for a $400,000 home. The 2021 legislature added restrictions excluding drought, epidemic, or pandemic from qualifying disasters after some localities exploited COVID-19 declarations, while requiring physical property damage and preventing reuse of the same disaster declaration. State Representative Briscoe Cain has vowed to introduce legislation abolishing the disaster exception entirely, arguing it undermines taxpayer protections during vulnerable times. Texas real estate markets show increasing inventory with a 30.7% surge in available homes and median days on market rising to 57 from 45 year over year, creating a more balanced environment with 6.1 months of supply in Austin. The median Texas home price is $352,700 in July 2025, declined 0.25% year over year, with Austin dropping 3.3% to $435,000, while statewide sales reached 343,240 units on a seasonally adjusted annual basis. Price dynamics shifted notably, with 43.5% of homes experiencing price cuts compared to 35% previously, and only 12.6% selling above list price versus 13.9% the prior year. The Texas Real Estate Research Center projects single-family sales growth of 3% to approximately 340,000 units, with median prices holding just above $350,000 through 2025. Mortgage rates averaging 5.6% to 6% for 30-year fixed loans continue challenging affordability despite tax relief, with first-time buyers struggling even as they gain negotiating leverage from increased inventory. Single-family permits are expected to reach 165,000 units, a 2.5% increase, while apartment deliveries dropped to 55,000 units from 116,000 in 2024. For investors, single-family rents remain flat around $2,200 monthly, with multifamily showing minimal 0.5% growth statewide, while industrial real estate performs strongest, with 3% rent growth expected. Cap rates are adjusting to reflect lower property tax burdens in investing calculations, though high mortgage rates continue dampening returns. Geographic variations create opportunities in entry-level markets like El Paso, $259,000 median, and Wichita Falls, $199,000, offering relative affordability compared to major metros. Texas allocated $51 billion over the 2026-27 biennium for property tax relief, representing 15% of total state spending and including $44.5 billion to maintain cuts enacted since 2019, plus $3.5 billion for new relief measures. The state surplus declined from a record $32.7 billion in 2023 to $23.8 billion currently, with $194.6 billion in available revenue from 2026 to 27, and the Rainy Day Fund projected to reach $28.5 billion by August 2027. Total state funds, including federal sources, amount to $362.2 billion. Revenue projections show vulnerability, with sales tax generating $94.24 billion, 60% of general revenue, subject to economic cycles, while oil and gas revenue faces volatility at the current $70 per barrel WTI price target. Federal funding comprises approximately 30% of the state budget, down from peak COVID-era support of $85 billion, now fully depleted. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick prioritizes continued property tax compression, teacher salary increases, and infrastructure investments in water and energy grid improvements. The average homeowner saves $490 annually on a typical $302,000 home, with previous 2023 cuts combining for a total savings of $1,763. Senior homeowners see combined cuts of $1,933, achieving a 58.5% reduction in school district property taxes. The increased homestead exemption to $140,000 means 492 school districts where average home values fall below this threshold could see homeowners pay zero school maintenance and operations taxes, fundamentally restructuring local government finance. Shannon Halbrook of Every Texan cautions, because of very specific, very unusual circumstances, we have a lot of money that we didn't expect to have. My fear is we're assuming that the money isn't permanent, or that we're going to have that kind of money going forward to keep paying for these recurring tax cuts every budget, every session. And that's just simply not the case. This concern resonates across the political spectrum, with Republican Senator Charles Perry of Lubbock warning, "We're building a large obligation, and it's going to detract from things we absolutely can't afford not to do if we're not careful." The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas describes the Texas economy as healthy but slowed, citing uncertainty around Trump administration policies, including tariffs, immigration restrictions, and potential federal spending cuts that could make matters worse for the state's economy. Sales tax collections are slowing as inflation moderates and housing costs consume larger household budget shares, while the U.S. Energy Information Administration projects oil demand will shrink through 2026, threatening energy-related revenues. Structural vulnerabilities include the loss of $85 billion in COVID relief funds, increasing dependence on volatile sales and energy taxes, and trade policy uncertainty affecting Texas's export-dependent economy. Rahul Srinivasan of Texas 2036 observes, "It's something that we can afford to do now. I don't know if it's something that we can afford to do on this scale every session." Dr. Vance Ginn of Texas Policy Research Institute criticizes the selectivity of relief measures, noting the legislature chose to pick winners as those with a homestead and losers as those without, creating equity concerns. Bill King from Rice University's Baker Institute provides measured assessment. "I don't think we're in any kind of crisis, but I think the days of big budget surpluses are probably over. We're going to be very careful how we spend money. Local governments face particular pressure, with McLennan County commissioners noting they must either raise rates or reduce services to offset state-mandated exemptions without compensation, potentially making counties look like the bad guys when forced to increase rates." California's Proposition 13, passed in 1978 with 64.8% voter approval, limited property taxes to 1% of assessed value and capped annual assessment increases at 2%, causing property tax revenue to plummet 60% in the first year. The state fell from 5th to 47th nationally in per-pupil education funding within 2 decades, spending $1,900 below the national average by 2015-2016. School funding shifted from 60% local property taxes before Prop 13 to 60% state funding afterward, creating what Stanford's Michael Kirst called massive centralization of California's state education policy. The Rand Corporation's 2005 study documented substantial deterioration in student achievement, with immediate cuts to summer schools, adult education, vocational programs, and counseling services. Infrastructure maintenance was deferred, assistant principals and librarians eliminated, and programs for gifted students, arts, and field trips disappeared. Professor Julian Betts of UCSD notes, "We still haven't really caught up to the other states, nearly 5 decades later. Economic distortions persist with annual property sales declining from 16% in 1977 and 78 to just 5% by 2014 and 15, creating a lock-in effect where homeowners stay an average 1.04 years longer to preserve tax benefits. New buyers pay $2.69 per square foot in commercial property taxes versus 87 cents for 20-year owners, while corporations like Chevron and Disney continue paying 1970s-based taxes. California's shift to high income and capital gains tax dependence created severe budget volatility, with school funding falling $7 billion during the Great Recession. Texas appears to have learned from California's experience by targeting relief through homestead exemptions rather than blanket caps, maintaining local school district autonomy, and committing state funds proactively to offset local revenue losses. The Texas approach preserves the three-legged stool of federal, state, and local funding, while California's over-centralization eliminated local control. Jennifer Imazeki of San Diego State University warns, "In one fell swoop, it really decimated the amount of money available to schools at the local level, a fate Texas seeks to avoid through its more nuanced reform strategy." Texas's unprecedented $51 billion property tax reform package delivers meaningful relief, averaging $490 to $1,250 annually per homeowner, while raising serious questions about long-term fiscal sustainability as surplus funds diminish and revenue sources face increasing volatility. The November 2025 ballot measures, including Proposition 13's homestead exemption increases to $140,000 to $200,000, could eliminate school property taxes entirely for many seniors, but depend on continued economic growth and stable energy prices that economists increasingly doubt. While Texas has crafted more targeted reforms than California's disastrous Proposition 13 of 1978, which devastated school funding and created massive inequities, the commitment to maintaining these tax cuts through economic downturns remains untested, leaving property owners celebrating immediate savings, while fiscal experts warn of inevitable reckoning when extraordinary surpluses become ordinary deficits. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe, share, and watch this one as well.